So how might the Dalai Lama's meeting with President Obama affect US-China relations? For that, we want to go beyond the headlines tonight and talk with Professor Robert Barnett, who is the director of the Modern Tibetan Studies program at Columbia University in New York. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, Professor.
My pleasure.
Why is China so upset about today's meeting?
It's a very important issue for China, not just because it means that the Americans are not giving in to Chinese pressure and demands, but also because in the last 2 years, China's very much stepped up the Tibet issue. It's announced that it is now what it calls a core interest for China, more important than the Taiwan issue internationally. And they see the Dalai Lama as a splittist, someone who's trying to split Tibet and from China, and therefore they think that the Americans must be aiming to do the same thing when they meet him.
Although that's no longer what the Dalai Lama wants, right?
No, and he gave up that claim, that suggestion 30 years ago. This is why it's really very puzzling and very problematic, really, for the Americans when they're being told by the Chinese to stop the meeting. The Chinese actually demanded frequently that the Americans should not allow the Dalai Lama even to visit America. So, but the Americans can't really give in to that very easily because there's no evidence that the Dalai Lama supports independence, no serious evidence anymore.
Do you think that this meeting will do any sort of long-term, lasting damage to US-China relations?
No, I think now the Chinese are going to want to get out of this issue and let everybody forget it as quickly as possible, the question of Obama meeting the Dalai Lama, because the Chinese have had a huge run of success in the last 2 years in very significantly upgrading this issue and using very strong pressure on other governments not to meet with the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama only met 2 national leaders last year. That's much less than most years. Most European governments, except for the Czechs, actually caved in to Chinese pressure and cancelled meetings with him or avoided them. So this ends a long run of success for China by the Americans today. And it means that really China's bluff is being called.
Do you think that they might retaliate in some way?
Well, they probably have to do something, but it will probably be on a more ritualistic level. They might cancel a meeting or some kind of technical cooperation for a while. But we've already seen that they've allowed the American aircraft carrier Nimitz to dock in Hong Kong. That seems very significant, and I think that gives us the clue that for the Chinese, the much more important issue for them is not to provoke the Americans into selling F-16 aircraft to Taiwan. That's really what the Chinese are worried about. They were hoping that this pressure would work on the Americans. Hasn't really succeeded. They're going to have to probably rethink their strategy there.
Could there be some loss here for the United States? I mean, given the growing importance of the US-China relationship, do you think that the president's meeting with the Dalai Lama was worth having?
Well, it's quite interesting how the Americans are handling it, much more skillfully than they handled these kind of issues last year with China. That's to say they're giving some concessions to China in things that China really worries about. The Chinese really want this meeting to be private, not public, like the last Bush meeting with the Dalai Lama 3 years ago. And the Americans have given that concession to China, but they know that that doesn't matter to the American public or to Tibetans. So they're giving small things and still keeping the substantial issues of having the meeting.
Okay, Professor Barnett, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.